Dear Michael Thompson, we're really, really happy to have you in Romania, and you are delighting our Romanian audience with your talks. And now I'd like to ask you a few questions about boys, because you are the world's most famous specialist on boys.
Thank you for that.
You are. The first question is, why did you choose to focus on boys when, the general public thinks like, girls are more sensitive and they're more vulnerable? Why did you choose boys?
Oh, I think it made me angry that people seem to think that boys are simple psychologically and girls are complex. And over the years of my private practice, I was seeing more boys and more men, which is not typical. It's women who usually come to psychotherapy, but I found that men and boys were coming to me, and men talking with pain about their boyhoods, of not being understood, and boys saying, the school doesn't understand me, they misinterpret me, and so I wanted to explain about boys to the public.
Do boys tend to be more aggressive than girls in general? Because that's another, a common perception of boys.
Boys tend to be more physical, and boys are wired biologically for what scientists call rough and tumble play. Rough and tumble play is not aggression, and it's not violence. Rough and tumble play is rough and tumble play.
Wow.
When people say, boys play and they're so violent, I always say, if a teacher says that to me, I say, oh, are people getting hurt? No, she says, but they're always playing hunt and chase games. I say, are people getting hurt? And she said, well, sometimes there's an accident. I said, well, an accident's an accident. Are they trying to hurt each other? And I get very fierce about that, because when teachers say boys are so aggressive, or boys play war games, I said, what's war game? Well, they shoot each other, right? Kindergarten boys shoot each other, and one falls to the ground, he gets up, and he shoots another boy, and they're laughing and they're running around. I said, that's play. That's not violence.
No.
Well, but it involves guns. I said, oh, really? When people take boys so literally, or they put boys' play in an adult context of adult violence, I think that's a disservice. It's a misunderstanding to boys.
But parents say that, okay, so if they're shooting each other in play, won't they be shooting or hurting each other in real life? How can we
There is no scientific basis for that. Boys' play does not lead to violence.
No.
Poverty, seeing male violence, seeing your father batter your mother, seeing gangs in the neighborhood fight, that does lead to violence. Playing with lightsabers, playing Star Wars, playing Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. Boys have been playing heroic games. Why don't we call them heroic games rather than aggressive games?
Indeed,
It's heroes and villains. That's what boys want to play.
That's great. What are the most common misconceptions about boys? One of them is, one of the cliches that parents say is boys shouldn't be crying, they should be tough men, they should be like soldiers, and they shouldn't be showing emotions. So that's one of them. What do you think of this one? And do you know other misconceptions?
Yesterday in the workshop I had 5 mothers say to me, oh, my son is very sensitive, as if they were apologizing for him. And I always say, yes, human beings are sensitive. And then they say, well, my son is very anxious. And I always say to them, 50% of boys are above average anxious. And they look at me like that's an illumination, But of course, there's some very not anxious boys. There's some very anxious boys. There's some very not anxious girls. There's some anxious girls. Boys have a full complement of feelings. We do train boys to hide feelings that keep them from looking strong. And boys train each other because boys get in an ethic of being male means to be strong. Well, being human means sometimes you feel weak, sometimes you feel helpless, you sometimes feel ashamed. And what boys are taught to do by teenage years is take feelings of shame and helplessness and convert those into anger. So when in fact they feel inadequate, they act very angry. And then people think, what an angry boy. And I think you have to look below and see what a frightened boy, what an ashamed boy. And that's sometimes hard to do, especially when they get big, and when they get bigger than their mothers, because the mothers think, whoa, You know, and he's so angry and wow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then she's thinking maybe he's a bad man, not a sensitive man. But what he's doing is trying to deal with
his fears.
His fears.
Yeah.
Do you think that having success in life for a child, boy or girl, depends on the success in school, and that the success in school depends on his or her relationship with the parents?
The most important thing in life is to have parents who love you and believe in you.
That
You can go very far in life just with your mother's love.
it all starts from love.
Oh, yes, of course. And it starts from love and trust, that your mother and father trust that you're a good girl and a good boy. And they're not always frightened about your they're not always criticizing, they're not always poking and prodding and frantically worrying. You can make a child quite anxious by chronic worry. One of the reasons I'm here is to try and calm parents down. Now, in the information age with global competition, school has become more important. But you and I know many people who are successful who weren't that good in school. It's bad to fail in school, but being at the top in school doesn't guarantee a good life. There are plenty of successful people who were in the middle of their class, had good friends, played sports, did extracurricular activities. So parents who think you can only have a good life if you're up here communicate often an extremely narrow worldview. There are many men, I know the man, you know the man, who couldn't wait to get out of school and get into business and did very well, even though they were CB students in school, right? Not all the A students become the most successful people. Yes, they go to graduate school, they become the professionals. That's good. But they're not necessarily the entrepreneurs. Find a bunch of entrepreneurs and ask them what they got for grades. And so the link between school and a successful life is not one-to-one. The link between being loved by your parents and feeling good about yourself as an adult is much closer.
As a parent, how can we maintain and encourage children to learn, because the educational system in Romania is somehow failing in encourage them to learn and develop and see the world as they should. How can we encourage them?
You have to give your child the love of learning. The love of learning comes from sharing what you love. Share music. If you play music, play music. If you love sports, read the paper and read the sports pages with your child. And a father and son or a father and daughter can spend every morning looking for the statistics on their favorite team. That's a way to teach mathematics. You can play counting games. You can play all kinds of word games when you're driving in the car. The idea that the only way to learn is to be fierce about homework is an extremely narrow idea of learning. Children are eager to learn. Cook with your child. Have them measure things, right? Talk about vegetables, talk about meat. There are many ways you can learn with a child that don't feel like school. People who are trying to imitate school at home are boring their children.
What should it be, the relationship between parents and the teacher, so the kids could be happy in school?
Kids like it when the adults in their lives agree on that. So the teachers and the parents should talk until they understand they're seeing the same child. Some parents come in and say, our daughter is fantastically gifted, and the teacher thinks, no, not quite as gifted as you think, right? And that's a tense moment for teachers and parents. But over time, parents get, as their children are in school, they get more realistic about where their child falls. And if parents can convey respect for teachers and be willing to learn what the teacher sees, and if the teacher conveys respect for parents and is willing to learn about the child from the parent, things will go much better.
In your book, Best Friends, Worst Enemies, you are talking about several groups of children, but I'd like to mention three. One is excluded children, one is accepted, and the other ones are the bully types. Do you know what makes a child fall into one of these categories?
In my book, I'm sorry to correct you, but in my book I give a hierarchy from very popular to accepted,
Okay.
to average,
Yeah.
and then to children who are rejected.
Okay.
And children who are controversial.
Yeah.
And those 85% of children have friends. If you have a friend, at least one, you're probably safe.
You're safe.
But there are 15% of kids who are at risk because no one stands up for them or they lack social skills. You have to figure out first, when a child is isolated, you have to figure out what is happening. Does the child not pick up social cues on a wiring basis? Is it like a social learning disability? Or is the child arrogant? Is it an only child who comes in and thinks he's the gift from the gods and corrects everybody's vocabulary and is arrogant? Everybody hates an arrogant kid.
Of course.
So you have to figure out what a child is doing to prevent him or her from developing
making
friendship,
friends.
and then you work with them.
Okay.
But most kids are making friends.
Yeah. That's
What
the
is
good
the
news.
problem? That's the good news. The problem is parents who want their children to be more popular.
Yeah.
That the parents are competitive for their kids' status. That's very complicated because you can't really affect your child's status. You can't give the fancy birthday party with gifts for everybody. It's a mistake.
Yeah.
It's a mistake. Parents who try and get in and essentially relive their own popular years or correct their own unpopular years by getting in and living their child's life, they make a mess of it.
Yeah, and it's true that what I notice about myself is when my daughter gets rejected, then I feel rejected,
Yes, of
you
course.
know, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, and what
Well, you
can-
know, best friends, worst enemies starts with my daughter's birthday party,
Yes,
where I
know.
got so
Joanna's-
angry at the girls
Yeah, you
because
wanted to throw them out of
I
your
wanted to
house.
throw them out.
Yeah.
I know that feeling as a parent.
Yeah, and then you also say like she didn't remember a few years later. She said, "Well, that was just an experience."
Yes.
Yeah,
that's
that's
right.
amazing, isn't
Yes,
it? Yeah.
a chapter in my book though.
Yeah, I know. Suppose I have a son who gets bullied.
Yes.
Can I talk directly to the bully?
No. Bullying is something chronic, repeated, hurtful, and overwhelming. And one day's hurt feelings on the playground is not bullying. But if your child comes home day after day with a story and it feels hurt and overwhelmed, you say, what do you want to do? Do you want my help? Now, a first grader or second grader might want your help.
Yeah.
And then the help you give is to go to talk to the teacher. Or if you have a friendship, you talk to the mother and say, things are not going well for our boys. But if you don't have a relationship with the mother, it's tricky. Go to the teacher. Does the teacher see this? And you can only address bullying if you see it in front of you.
Yeah.
If it's just based on your child's stories, then you have to remember you may not get
The right information.
all of the
Details,
story.
yeah.
Your own child may be more annoying than you know.
Yes.
So you probably need somebody who's a little more objective to say. So if you think your child's being bullied, definitely go to the school. Definitely talk to someone you trust at the school.
Yeah.
We have a question from one of our readers.
Okay.
And she said like this. I have a 13 years old child and the term controlled freedom, controlled liberty, is too blurry for me as a parent. Rebel years are coming and the teenager will want to live, to experience, to know the world. The teenage girls wish to be loved, to have boyfriends, to explore their sexuality, to try everything from drugs, alcohol, to lost nights. So maximum of independence. But what is maximum of independence? And how correct is to negotiate you have good marks, so I give you freedom.
So you're getting A's in school so you can have sex with your boyfriend?
Not sex, but freedom.
Well, but this is what she's writing about. First of all, the assumption that the adolescent years are rebel years is wrong. There are many adolescents who simply grow upwards in a steady taking more rights and taking more responsibilities, becoming more mature and having more freedom. We want our children to become independent. We want them to be able to make relationships. We want them to find sexual satisfaction in life. We just want to slow them down. Every parent wants to slow them down. And that's our job as parents. is not to stop them entirely, but to slow them down. So the reason I can't draw a line for this questioner, whom I kind of assume is a mother, is because it partly depends on her values. And you should never ask a psychologist to solve a values problem. What I'm saying is you want to hold kids back so they don't get into reckless situations, so they don't drink too much, they don't take drugs and harm their brain, or they don't get themselves into sexual situations which are too advanced. And all of that has to be negotiated. But it is normal and healthy for an adolescent to push for more independence and more separate life from the parents. What you need to insist on is they still are in touch with you, that they still are having dinner with you, that they respect the grandparents, that they do well in school, that they meet their responsibilities. Usually by that anchors a child. Some expectations for school and for respect for the family will anchor a child so they're not too much out of control. But there is a small minority of adolescents who do spin out of control. They get too angry, they are too rebellious, and for them you may need to put more of a framework around them. The end goal for every child is that they grow up to be a loving, moral, productive, independent young adult. Loving means they need maybe some practice with love. Moral means they need to behave in moral ways and have practice treating other people well. Productive means they learn to practice work. And independent means they practice being away from you. Loving, moral, productive, independent. Those are my goals for a child.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much. That's
Thanks.
great.